A circle of sober addicts shares their stories as the movie opens inside a recovery facility. Then, a nurse informs them that Darby, the woman, has received an important phone call. When she answers it, a relative tells her that her mother suffered an aneurysm and is currently being treated at the hospital in Salt Lake City with her sister Devin. It makes sense that Darby is concerned. Their relationship is strained when she secretly calls her sister Devin that night. Darby doesn't care that Devin doesn't even want to see him. She decides to steal a car and leave the facility. While traveling, she stops on the side of the road, and we are taken back to a terrible time in her past when her mother and sister discovered her overdosing inside a car. Back to the present, the officer informs her that a storm is approaching, and Darby should wait it out at the neighboring visitor center. All highways are closed. Darby complies and heads over. Upon arrival, she finds others also waiting for the storm to pass. After using the restroom, she reads the texts her sister gave her, warning her not to visit the hospital. Darby takes out a small bag of cocaine due to stress, but decides against using it. Later, Darby decides to go outside to the parking lot for phone service. Approaching the noise, she discovers a child restrained inside a vehicle. Finding the door locked, she snaps a picture of the license plate and assures the child she will return before heading to her car. Unable to reach 911, Darby returns inside. Observing the group around her, including Lars, Ash, Sandy, and Ed, she suspects one of them is involved. As they gather to play a card game, Ed suggests the activity to pass the time. During the game, Darby engages in conversation, subtly probing for information to identify the kidnapper, noting the Nevada license plate on the van. Tension rises when she learns Lars is from Nevada and notices his erratic behavior during the game. Seizing the opportunity, Darby excuses herself, enters a locked bathroom, and discreetly texts 911 about the child's kidnapping, including a photo of the vehicle plate. Darby gets up and uses a hammer to remove a plank from the wall, leaving a hole she can crawl through, realizing she needs to take matters into her own hands. She makes her way back around and returns to the van, which she enters after using a little metal bar to unlock the door. Devin, however, covers herself with a blanket while Lars starts speaking softly to the child, who goes by the name of Jay. When Lars realizes something, he pauses. Darby discovers that Lars is carrying a gun in his back pocket. Lars sits again and starts talking about Uncle Kenny, the man he's going Jay to. Then he gets out of the van and says he will get some munchies for Jay. After leaving in discomfort, Darby starts to ash about the young girl who was tied up inside the truck and how Lars must now be suspecting that she knows. Ash appears anxious. He makes a strategy and retrieves a nail gun from the tool cart inside the room. Darby is supposed to go outside again, but this time, she must ensure Lars follows her. Ash is expected to inform Ed, the ex-Marine, about the situation while Lars is away. But as Darby gets back inside the van, Jay innocently inquires as to the whereabouts of the men who abducted her, implying that there are other abductors. Darby glances out and sees Ash and Lars having a conversation. Lars takes the nail gun, and Ash takes the handgun. They intend to surprise Darby. Ash and Lars follow Darby's lead and sneak back into the structure. Ash confronts her, stealing her phone. Back in the front hall, Ed starts to worry that something is wrong. He goes outdoors to investigate. Ash starts interrogating Darby, pressing her for details about her family. Darby, who is afraid, answers that her father shot himself when he even goes so far as to inquire about how her father passed away. Additionally, he informs her that Jay has Addison's condition, which increases the risk of an adrenaline overdose. Therefore, Darby's attempt to save her wasn't helpful. Just as Ed approaches the vehicle and tries to unlock the door, Jay is inside it, taking off the duct tape binding her with the box cutter Darby gave her. For some reason, Jay stays silent this time. Returning to Ash and Darby, Sandy interrupts and requests a private conversation with Darby. Ash tells Darby, just before he goes, not to tell anyone, or he will murder them all. Despite Sandy noticing how shaken she is, Darby is so terrified that he doesn't tell her what's happening. Darby deflects the conversation by inquiring about brain aneurysms and the likelihood of her mother's survival. Later, the two women return to the front hall by foot and join the guys at their table. Soon afterward, as Darby witnesses, Jay unties her knot and exits the van. Lars goes outside to pursue the child after he and Ash both notice this. But Ed and Sandy still appear to be ignorant of this. After Darby leaves for restroom use, Ash excuses himself and follows her. As they start fighting, fortunately, Lars shows up right before Ash can do any significant damage to Darby. Lars tells him they need to follow the child as she has escaped to the hiking trail. Darby is made to look for the youngster with the two abductors. By hiking the trail, Darby won't comply while they search for the child. Ed heard the gunshot from inside the building, so he went outside with Sandy. Ash and Lars search for her while Darby crawls to hide. Fortunately, she can disappear. Ed finds an unconscious Jay in the interim and quickly drags her inside. When Ed and Sandy notice the bracelet on the child's wrist, they instantly find out she has a medical issue. Not long after, Ash and Lars appear in front of the building and start screaming. Ed yells as he realizes the two kidnappers are getting closer and uses the chairs to block the front door to buy some time. The kidnappers retreat as a result, debating whether or not Ed is bluffing. We find out inside that Ed isn't carrying a gun. The kidnappers devise yet another strategy. They start shouting that the girl is sick and that they are carrying the medication. Sandy, the former nurse, wavers inside. Jay already appears so pale that she may die, so she informs the other two that the kidnappers are probably right. Amidst all of this, the young one named Jay awakens and tells Sandy that it is true that Sandy and Jay are friends. Then, a flashback sequence is shown to us in which it is revealed that Sandy is bullied by Jay while working as a maid at his home. Sandy does nothing to save Jay when she is kidnapped and cries out for assistance later. Returning to the present, Sandy yells. The kidnappers eventually break inside the building after Sandy gives Darby a pepper spray in the eyes. Sandy is given the medication by Ash, who instructs her to give it to the child. Sandy, Ash, and Lars then argue with each other. After revealing to them that Darby had hidden the car keys someplace out back, Sandy, horrified, begs them not to do it and encourages them to take the child and leave because she is too scared to resist. Ed expresses his disapproval, and Darby reaches for the pepper spray lying on the ground, but Ash gets there before her. After leaving Darby nailed to the wall, they proceed to the bathroom to clean Lars up. Darby tries to get her wrist off the wall, but she can't because the pain is too great. She attempts to reach for a hammer she finds nearby, but it is too far away. She chooses to contact Jay for assistance. Lars seems disturbed because he doesn't think Ash will murder anyone. Jay gives Darby the hammer, but before Darby can free herself, the kidnappers return to the chamber, so she hides the hammer for now. Ash approaches her and tries to inquire again about the location of the automobile keys. Next, though, Darby texted 911 earlier, and it appears the message was received, as the cops are currently on their way to the location. This is when Ash and Lars get desperate. With the child's arm pulled, Ash points the nail gun at her wrist. When Darby notices this, he caves and admits that the car keys are hidden in the snow outside the restroom. Lars accepts Ash's rifle and heads to get the keys. Lars is quite scared and upset at all the violence that is occurring. Despite his fear, Jay complies with her request, but Lars freaks out and tells Jay to get back in his seat. Darby uses the chance to pull out the tiny package of cocaine she had hidden in her pocket and snort it to ease her discomfort. Darby takes advantage of Jay's failure to turn off the lights to remove the nail from her wrist as Lars tries in vain to capture Jay. While Darby and Jay slip outside and get into Darby's car, Ash races to help Lars. Ash tries to help Lars get over it, but the fall drives the nail farther into his head, killing him. With Lars's death, Ash is even more enraged. He goes outside and fires at the vehicle. He succeeds in blowing a tire, causing Darby to veer off course and crash. Ash is asked to move away from Darby's car by an officer who arrives at the scene just as he is approaching it. Darby is awake and alert now. She equips herself with a gun and a screwdriver. Darby tries to explain what's happening, but the cop shoots her in the gut since he is now wary of her. The cop is shot by Ash, who is still alive. He takes the nail gun and starts shooting the police until he dies. He then steals the officer's gun and goes back to murder Darby. However, after that, he is killed when Darby stabs him in the throat with the screwdriver. Darby uses her remaining strength to crawl into the snow and retrieve the radio belonging to the deceased cop. It has been more than a month since the incident when Darby returns to the treatment facility in the following scene. When she returns to her room, we find a child's painting on the wall, indicating that she has remained in contact with Jay since the incident. A nurse knocks on her door to let her know she has a guest. When Darby approaches the lobby, her sister Devon is seated and prepared to rebuild their bond. The movie finishes here with Darby grinning with relief.